So, over in the Bubble forum, Zealous Pudding, hi Zealous, I made a thing for you again, um, has a really good and interesting, thought-provoking thread going about Bubble GPT, and like Bubble and AI AI pair programming and yada yada yada, and the ethics of um, your source material, your training sets for AIs and stuff. I just wanted to show a few things because some of this is just easier to talk about than to write about, and I've been playing with this a lot. Um, so there's a couple of things here. One, GPT in general, in like versions 3 and up, has some web development chops. Now, 3.5 is sorry, I had a little interruption. So, in GPT 3.5, it'll write JavaScript code and it's pretty good at it, but it's not always excellent. And occasionally you would even see things that amounted to syntax errors, and the quality of the code wasn't very good. But GPT-4, as people are starting to notice, and that I started to notice last week, is like a huge, huge step up. It's also a huge step up in terms of the universe of things it knows about. So, like, one thing I just want to get out there, like, immediately is that if Bubble were like better known, like had more of a presence on the web, was used by more people. I mean, it's used by a lot of people. I guess there's millions of apps now, and there's probably, I guess, millions of people that are familiar with Bubble. But that's not really enough, compared to the hundreds of millions that know other development platforms and stuff like that. So there's very minimal information about Bubble out there. There's the Bubble forum. There's been some people doing YouTube videos and et cetera, et cetera. But it's not that much. And so, like, GPT 3.5 doesn't really know anything about Bubble. If we go to Chat GPT and select the 3.5 model, I can ask it a question like, how do you write an expression in the Bubble expression builder that finds the average of a list of numbers? And it gives me abject bullshit. This answer, while not exactly what they call a hallucination, I think, is authoritative bullshit. There's very little information about Bubble in 3.5. It just doesn't know. So I say, I asked it, how do I find the average of a list of numbers? It goes, oh, you can use the expression average, open paren list name. Replace list name with the name of the list you want to find the average of. For example, if you have a list name numbers list, the expression would be average of numbers list. This is not right at all, right? So it's sort of like it maybe knows Bubble a little bit. It knows what it is, and it's assuming that maybe it's kind of JavaScript-like, and well, there must be an average function, and so here's how an average function would work. This basically shows you that it doesn't know anything about Bubble. I mean, people ask it stuff like, how do you build a shopping cart and blah 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 blah, and it just it'll give you some general guidance, but not anything specific to the Bubble web development environment. Now, things are very different, or at least a little bit different, over in GPT-4. GPT-4 knows about Bubble. It has probably consumed the Bubble documentation, and it might understand a little bit about how the interface looks. It understands a lot more about the terminology. So, like, if I do that, but it's not very well versed in it. Okay, as we'll see. So here I did the same query. How do you write an expression in Bubble expression builder that finds the average of a list of numbers? Now, it tells me that Bubble is a visual programming language and a platform for building web apps. This is true and correct without having to write any code. That is somewhat true. In Bubble, you can use the expression builder to create dynamic expressions and calculate based on data. Yes, exactly. To find the average of a list of numbers, you can use the following steps, and here's where it starts to go wrong. Retrieve the list of numbers. First, you'll need to have access to a list of numbers, right? Good. This could be a calculated field, a custom state, or any other data source that contains a list of numbers. Good advice. Use the sum operation. This operation will add the numbers in the list together. To do this, your expression will look like this. List of numbers, sum. Yes, correct. Now, this is not the correct way to get the average, obviously. Count the number of items in the list. You'll need to count the numbers in the list to calculate the average. You can get the count by writing an expression like list of numbers, count. Yeah, right. That is the length of the list, right? Divide the sum by the count. To find the average, you'll need to divide the sum of numbers by the count of numbers. You can do this using the slash operator, division operator, in the expression builder. And here it writes something that this is not true. It's true today. It's true today because we have um, parens, but GPT-4 does not know about the parens feature in Bubble, right? It that came later than its knowledge cutoff date. So again, this is getting into the realm of authoritative bullshit, and it seems to have forgotten or does not know that there are already median and average list operators on lists of numbers. So it proposes something that is correct, and this actually would work, but it doesn't know very much about Bubble. Now, interestingly, it knows it does know a little bit about the plugin API. So let's ask it about that. What do you know about the Bubble plugin API and building plugins for Bubble? The Bubble plugin API allows developers to extend the functionality of the Bubble platform by creating custom plugins. True. Plugins can add new elements, actions, or data sources to a Bubble app. Mostly true. Building plugins for Bubble is an excellent way to provide additional functionality to the Bubble community and create usable components for your own applications. Well, that is true. Here's an overview of the process. To build a plugin for Bubble. 1. Create a new plugin. To start, navigate to the Bubble plugin editor by visiting the Bubble dashboard. This is sort of true, right? Clicking on the plugins tab, there's not such a thing. It doesn't know the interface for the plugin builder very well. It does understand it a little bit. Its details are a little wonky, so there's not really great training on this. What my point is, if Bubble were better known, if the Bubble plugin API were better documented, the documentation can only be exposed by actually building a plugin, and then it's context sensitive. And except for stuff that people have written in the forums or sample code that may be on GitHub that GPT might have seen, um, it's really deficient in what it knows, and it's sad because Bubble plugin development is mostly like it's plain old JavaScript, right? And you can build plugins like just that are completely encapsulated in JavaScript, in a single function, and that's how I write mine. Let's see what else it's saying here. Define your elements. Okay, so here you go. If your plugin requires custom visual elements, you can create them using the Elements tab in the plugin editor. That is correct. Define the elements' properties, appearance, and behavior. That's very detailed, and that's very correct. Add actions. Plugins can include custom actions that extend Bubble's built-in actions. In the Actions tab, click Add an Action. There is no Add Action, but you can specify the action's name, description, and inputs, blah, blah, blah. Implement server-side actions. So it knows about the three APIs. It knows about there's an element API, there's a client-side actions API, and there's a server-side SSA API. Access API data. This is clearly a reference to the API part of the plugin builder. So this is actually a lot of knowledge. Now, from what it knows so far, it doesn't know the specifics of the API, and it doesn't actually. I know this because I've been building a script to bring it up to speed. It doesn't know about things like instance.publish state. It doesn't know what's on the different objects. It doesn't really understand instance properties and context. Um, it doesn't know about trigger event and things like this. So if I were to ask it to build a Bubble plugin that does X and Y, it's going to be really deficient. But maybe we should try it. Let's say write the code for a Bubble plugin that takes, I haven't tried this one yet. I'm going to try it after I train it with my script. That takes two lists of numbers. I'm going to capitalize it so it stands a chance maybe of knowing that I'm talking about Bubble lists and not normal arrays. Write the code for Bubble plugin that takes two lists of dates as input, uh, and outputs a list of date ranges, Bubble date ranges. Capitalize it. Bubble date ranges where the nth item, or we'll just say, let's use natural language, where the corresponding dates in list 1 and list 2 represent the start and end dates of our output date ranges. Right. What's going to happen here? To create a bubble plugin that takes two listed dates as inputs and outputs a list of bubble date ranges, you'll need to define a server-side action. Interesting choice. This is because Bubble does not support complex data types like date ranges directly within client-side actions. This is not correct. Follow these steps to create the plugin. So see, it also is missing basic information about like Bubble data types and what they're composed of. Okay, so it says go to the plugin builder. Yeah, go to the server-side actions. Um, yeah, you just the detail here is not correct. You go to actions, and then you would create a new action, and you would select that it's a server-side action rather than a client-side action from a dropdown. But whatever. Define the inputs for the action. Click plus add parameter and add the first input. Let's see. That's not really right. Although it's sort of right. See, it's saying, so we'll give it a name, parameter name, start date list, parameter type, list of dates. Kind of correct. What it's really referring to is this would be the fields section of the Bubble plugin builder. So it should really be saying define a new field. But this is fine. What it's doing with the parameter names here, it's telling us that it's going to use these names inside of its code for the properties. Now it's still going on about the output. Sorry, this takes a while. Add return value. So yeah, so there's no like plus, there's no plus sign for add return value. It's talking about the return types section of an SSA plugin. Let's see function properties context. It actually got this right. So like this is the code for a SSA plugin. They have to start function properties context, and this should all be in a single function. So he's going to say constant start date list, end date list equals properties. Okay, so he's deconstructing the properties object. At least it knew about that. We have to say continue. Unfortunately, it didn't. I hate when it does that. So we won't be seeing this in a code block yet. Okay. All right. So so it's just comparing the length of the dates list, and then it's going to do a map operation on them, right, to create the start date list dot map const end date equals end date list index return. What did it just return? It's returning a string. I see. So it returns a string, and then it doesn't get the return values right because the return is a JSON object. Okay. So that was probably really painfully boring for anyone else to look at. So basically, by having a lot of these conversations with GPT-4 and working with it interactively, like showing it examples of my own plugin code, and actually like writing a little script that sets out, okay, here's what's important to know about the Bubble plugin builder APIs. Which is there's actually a lot that potentially it doesn't know. I've been able to create a script. Now, the thing is like, an input prompt can only be so large. And currently, this is the only way you can access GPT-4 is in Chat GPT Plus, where you get a limited number of GPT-4 responses. And you can put about like, I don't know, the prompt can be about 20 or 25K, depending on how you consider the size of things. But basically, what I've been able to do is create a prompt that's really like a condensed guide to building Bubble plugins that focuses on all the things that GPT-4 does not already know. So what I'm going to do is it's just going on and on and on. Add an action. I don't know. So here it's going completely kind of bonkers at this point. But anyway, I'm going to drop my prompt in, and don't worry, I am going to release this as Karmaware once it's had a little more time to bake and stuff. But here's like 16K of text that's all about building Bubble plugins the Keith way. Boom. Huge ass huge ass prompt. And I can't get to my button because Loom is in my way. Here we go. All right, look at that. So this whole thing, which includes like some sample code for like a minimal bubble element plugin, this is the information, at least that I know so far, that GPT-4 needs to know that it doesn't already know about bubble plugins in order to write one the proper way. So with this information loaded, which it has just all this different information organized in a way that GPT-4 likes, that it told me that it likes. It also was able to tell me, like, here's the important part of what I just learned from looking at your sample code, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This essentially trains it to write an element plugin. So now I can say, I can do that. We can do that same prompt, right? Write a bubble element plugin that has, okay, so this is the other thing. So you have to know a little bit about like plugins to like describe this the right way, but we're going to write a bubble element plugin that has an action on it that can take two lists of dates as input and return a list of bubble, return / publish, we'll say publish, so it doesn't get confused. I don't want it to get confused about SSAs. Take two lists of dates as input and return / publish a list of bubble date ranges. Is that all I have to do? Let's see. And I'm going to say write the code for it. Okay. Now, with this new knowledge loaded, it's going to be a lot more helpful. The other thing it's going to do, unless I tell it to kind of be quieter about this, it'll actually, it kind of describes the whole process. So at some point, it will either tell me about, yeah, so it starts with it's going to start with the code in this case, but then it'll tell me what to do with it. So here's the code for a bubble element plugin that has an action that takes two lists of dates as input and turns a list of date ranges. Follow the instructions in the comments to set the plugin up. Oh, to set up the plugin in the plugin builder. This is different. I wonder if it's actually going to put the comments in the right place. So this is correct. So function instance context is how an initialized function has to start. I've also had to stress to it that the lack of space here, even though it's non-standard JavaScript, is a bubble requirement. I've then also taught it to put all your code in a wrapper so that all of the code for all of the actions and the update function and stuff can just live in this file, which is how I write my plugins. And then it can tell me what I do to access the actions and access the update function. It also knows about some helper functions. This is a good sign here that it understood that it's going to have to fetch these lists and they're not already bubble arrays. So it put my helper function in here that's called getList. It put it on the instance.data object, which is correct. And now it gives me an update function. I've also trained it with this script to create an update function, even if it doesn't need one. And just like in best practices for all bubble element plugins, it triggers an initialized state. It publishes an initialized state, and then it triggers an initialized event. So this is a little bit Keith in a box. This is like, it's pretty amazing. Okay, and so now we have an action function, which it is also named and written the way that I would do it. Instance.data.func create date ranges, okay? And that takes instance properties and context. Yep, and I write properties as props here. So that's good, it got that. So start dates list equals instance.data.getList props.startDate, absolutely correct. End dates list equals instance.data.getList props.enddates. Yes, that's actually correct. And then, oh, we're going to have to continue. You know, I kind of think like I think they're really throttling GPT-4 a little bit here. So then we check if the lists have the same length. This is again the action function. It initializes the date ranges to be an empty array. Yep. Okay, iterate through the start and end dates, creating date ranges. Let's see if it does this right. So this is correct. Start date is start dates list sub I, end date is end dates list sub I, yes. Are you going to put them into a 2-element array? Uh-oh. So this is kind of funny. It makes a weird choice here. If start date is greater than end date, oh yeah, well, I guess that sort of makes sense. You could log that error. Start date was earlier than the end date. You know, this is the thing. I'm kind of out of data in this script. It actually should know kind of Anyway, I'd have to tell it. See, it doesn't know that Bubble would actually magically flip the range to be start and end. Although it also could have. Well, I'll just ask it to do that, I guess, in the future. I could just tell it, hey, don't error out on that. Just flip the order of the dates, you dum dum. Okay, so anyway, what does it do? Create a date range object and add it to the date ranges array. So it says constant date range equals object start and end. Okay, that's incorrect, right? It's not, date ranges are not an object. They're a two-element array of JavaScript dates. So I am going to have to tell it to like look this over again. But then it publishes the state date ranges. Okay, like your plugin would error out at this point, and then it triggers an event, which is a best practice. And then yeah, initialize the plugin by calling instance.data.date range wrapper. It seems to have it left a closing bracket off of that. There's a little tiny syntax error in, oh no, there it is. There's the closing bracket. It's just the formatting in the GPT chat console that's wrong. So the plugin code is correct, but see, now it goes on to tell me, after you've added the code in the plugin builder, you'll need to set up the plugin's field states and events as follows. Field for start dates, field for end dates. Yep, that's a list of dates. A new state named date ranges. This is entirely correct with the type list of date ranges. Yes. A state named initialized with the type yes, no. Perfect. That's almost perfect. Bubble. Okay. Remember that bubble date ranges are not objects. Please fix your error. See if it figures it out. I'm basically saying, go reread the instructions. No, nope, nope, you're wrong again. Since Bubble doesn't have a built-in date range data type, we can store the date ranges as a list of texts. Instead, where each text represents a date range. Nope, nope, nope. I'm going to stop you right there. I'm going to stop you right there. Bubble date ranges, as I told you, because I like to be an asshole, as I told you, bubble date ranges are a two-element array of dates, like start date, end date. Also, in your code, if the start and end, if the input dates are in the wrong order, flip them around. Okay? Let's see if it rewrites the code correctly. So anyway, I don't have access to the GPT-4 API, but presumably there'll be a fine-tuning feature there, and so you could train on more voluminous docs about how to write Bubble plugins that could cover elements, client-side actions, and server-side actions. Looks like this is going to network error out on me, but it needs a little more text than this. But my point about this is like, GPT-4 already has a vast understanding of how to build a web app. And if you ask it, kind of generic questions around that, or if you're working in other languages, like there's a guy on Twitter that published a little like movie app that's built in Swift UI that Chat GPT-4 built in like 5 minutes. And the code compiled the first time. And he just kind of kept asking it to build new features, and it basically got them right. And then when it didn't get one right, like when there was an error, he just fed the error that he was getting from Swift, or the Apple app development stuff. He just fed the errors back to it and said, "I got this error. Can you fix it?" And it just fixes it. Didn't have to look at any API documentation. Now he's a Swift developer. But just like me, when I'm looking at this, like after I've trained this a bit, I'm like, well, holy God, you can actually write a plugin that's almost about anything, up to the limits of your memory. So it's pretty interesting. And Chat GPT it's really slow right now. Clearly, OpenAI is throttling us because people are doing so much stuff with it. Continue. Here's our action. Okay, so here's the part where it needed to fix two things. Here's our function create date ranges. Come on, keep going. All right. Yep, it's going to use the helper function to convert the lists into arrays. At least I didn't have to remind it of that. Very often it'll just go and like write something and it'll be like const list equals props.list1. And it's like, nope, that's not how you get the list. Okay, so here it does the get list function. Here it's comparing the lengths of the two lists. This makes sense to throw an error, I guess. I don't know. It's not really throwing an error, it's just commenting. Oh, but it does return. Oh, it won't. Yeah, it'll refuse to do it. I mean, it should just do it up to the size of the smallest list. It's not thinking about it very clearly. Okay, here's the iteration. Let's see if it creates the 2-element array this time. I know, you're probably like, this is watching paint dry. But I guess the point, the point that I wanted to make is that, like, if Bubble were more popular, GPT-4 would actually know, it would already know everything about the actions and the expression builder and uh, the what you can do on the client side versus what you can do on the server side. And like it doesn't need training. It wouldn't like need training on any specific app to be able to like advise you for like, here's how you'd build feature X. I mean, I suppose if you told it what the JSON, in a Bubble app means, like, kind of the way that the editor gets distilled down into, actions and stuff that have a unique ID and things like that, that it could maybe get even better. Of course, it might pick up like really dumb things because people, don't necessarily do things the right way in Bubble anyway. So it could pick up some bad practices. But I mean, I'm not worried about it, what it would be trained on, or what it would scrape with respect to Bubble, because like the part of web development in Bubble that GPT-4 doesn't already know is just the specifics of the interface. Like that's all there is. And it's cool. Actually, I read Josh's blog post. I think he's thinking about it the right way. I mean, GPT-4 is this huge like force multiplier, it for lots of different domains. Um, for this specific domain that we're looking at right now, like build a Bubble element plugin, well, maybe it's not that much of a thing. So what did this do here? So it's, yeah, date range equals start date, end date, and it's a 2-element array. Push it onto the initialized date range array and then publish the state. Yeah. And then trigger an event. Yeah. Okay. It did it right this time. So this plugin you could actually implement in the plugin builder, and it tells you exactly what to do. And the final thing it didn't really tell me is like, where do I put the different pieces of code? Let's see if I can answer that correctly. Now, I'm kind of trying to trick it a little bit because there's really not pieces of the code to put here. All right, so this is actually like writing out the steps. It does this all the time. This is nice. So it says create the plugin element. Yes. It won't have any visual aspect. Yes. It just has logic. Name it date range plugin. Okay. Order me around. Fields. Then you go and build the fields for it. Date range plugin. You create. Now this plugin doesn't need any fields. See, it's a little confused here because the fields are only needed in the action. Let's see. Did it do anything in the action in this version? No. All the update function does. The fields only relate to the update function. It's really talking about the fields for the action. But it's right about those. Okay, states in the elements tab of the plugin builder. Click on date range plugin. No, okay. Don't tell me where to click. You don't know where to click. But you know, GPT-4 actually has vision, right? There's essentially a vision plugin for it using this thing called Be My Eyes. And like I'm dying just to show it the plugin builder. Like, here's the interface, because it'll grok it at me. It'll be like, oh, okay, now I know the names for these things. Sorry, I couldn't tell you where to click before because I can't see it. I don't know it. Right. So here's the part about the action. It's going to tell us to configure this action. The fields thing is bogus though, because his code doesn't his its code doesn't use any fields. That update function doesn't need fields. Server side action code. This is where it's getting a little screwy too. In the actions tab, click create date. Yeah. So this is not server side action code. What it's really talking about here is it's like now in the code actions section, you would paste this into the oof. It should just be wow, what did it do here? It's really off track. Anyway, um, so the point is like you can get GPT-4 a lot closer. Yeah, this is bullshit. Now it's writing an SSA version. It's too bad. Sometimes this works perfectly, sometimes it doesn't. It just sort of depends. Anyway, I wish that GPT-4 knew a lot more about Bubble. It'd make things a lot easier. But another thing that's cool about the prompt that I'm creating here is that it really levels up GPT-4's knowledge about Bubble plugin creation, and you can, in fact, once that's loaded, you can ask it stuff like, "Hey, I'm a complete novice. Like, can you like walk me through a simple example of like creating a minimal Bubble element plugin?" And it'll do it, and it's actually a pretty good tutor. Um, so pretty interesting stuff. Oh, one other interesting thing. Let me just stop generating here. So even though it knows scant little about Bubble, check this out. What is list shifter? I swear to God, this is not in my script. Okay, it's not in my prompt. List shifter is a popular Bubble plugin developed by Keith, a member of the Bubble community. It provides advanced list processing capabilities to Bubble users, such as mapping, filtering, reducing, sorting, and more. With List Shifter, you can manipulate and process lists of data within your Bubble application without writing custom server-side code. It's stuck on server side here, obviously. List Shifter is particularly useful when working with large lists or when you need to perform complex operations on lists that are not natively supported by Bubble's built-in tools. So that's like all completely right. Then I can actually tell it. So it's telling you how to go to the marketplace, add list shifter, blah, 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 configure its properties and workflows to perform the desired list operations. The plugin also comes with documentation and examples to help you understand how to use its various features effectively. I'm not sure how true that is, but it's well documented in the forum now, isn't it? I mean, there is a link. My apologies for not recognizing you earlier. Thank you for creating the list shifter plugin for the Bubble community. It's like, that's so fucking creepy, right? Hi, Keith Crosley, creator of List Shifter. I admire your work. Anyway, that's all. 30 minutes. Bye.